Welcome to Hot Topic, and today I'm talking to Alan Johnson, Labour MP for Hull Weston Hessel since 1997, and between 2004 and 2010, Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, for Trade, for Education, for Health, and Home Secretary. He's also done various other jobs since then. Alan, welcome. Thank you very much for coming in.
Great to be here, Hugh. I didn't do all those jobs at the same time, by the way.
No, you didn't. You never did many of them for much more than a year either. You can't,
2 years at Health.
Can't keep down a job, is it?
Moved around too much.
One of the other jobs you did immediately after that in 2010 was Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer. We had Philip Hammond's budget last week. What would you have done differently? Not what would John McDonnell have done differently, but what would you have done differently?
I don't think either I or John McDonnell would have done much differently, but we wouldn't have been saddled with this ridiculous manifesto commitment. So David Cameron and George Osborne committed a Conservative government to 5 years, not knowing what kind of financial problems they were going to run into, not knowing what the outcome of the referendum on Europe was going to be. They committed a Conservative government to no tax rises whatsoever. And no tax rises means no national insurance rises, means no rise in the basic tax, etc. And so when he increased the national insurance for self-employed, where there's actually an argument for, provided they get the same benefits as employed staff, he was breaking a manifesto commitment. That's been the real problem for him. He didn't seem to notice that he was breaking a manifesto commitment, but he certainly knows it now. And indeed, there's the sound of some very rapid backtracking.
Well, that aspect of the finance bill isn't going to be debated till the autumn, we've learned since the budget. And there are, at time of recording, 14 Conservative MPs in a party with a majority of 16 have said that they're very much against that. So that is a bit of parliamentary
Exactly,
arithmetic.
and some of that is not on the issue itself. It's because they're breaking a manifesto commitment, and because that is seen to be very damaging to Theresa May, who has tried to put herself forward as a kind of new type of politician, someone you can trust. She carries out what people want her to do, and there they are, with a huge, huge problem.
That's enough on the Tory party. You're a Labour member of Parliament. If it had been your budget, you would have raised taxes then, you would have raised national insurance and presumably other taxes as well, because it would be your economic policy. And I know I don't want to suggest that you're in step march with the leadership of the Labour Party at the moment, but your economic policy would be to have further expenditure paid for by tax rather than by debt, or would you increase the debt?
Well, look, in terms of what John McDonnell would have done, you can hear his response to the budget. In terms of what I would have done, I think if you were looking for £2.6 billion and you were looking to put that into adult social care, then equalising national insurance between self-employed and employed made sense over a period of time, and provided the self-employed are going to get the same benefits, sick pay, maternity pay, etc. We wouldn't have raised taxes on everything. I think the problem for this government is they came in 2010 and have now been there 7 years, and they made their lodestar, their principal objective, eradicating the fiscal deficit first of all, in 4 years, the year before the 2015 general election, failed dismally, then said they'd clear it within this Parliament, have now backtracked on that. But the problem is all the sacrifice that people went through and all the effect on growth in this country. Our argument, I think it's a very strong argument, incidentally backed up by many economists, is that what George Osborne did by setting that as their goal, by raising VAT, you talk about tax rise, VAT tax rise
to 20%.
To 20% from 15%, hit the poorest. It's the poorest that are affected by tax rises like that, and did that and the result of that. He choked off the economic growth. The Tories didn't inherit a recession and deliver growth. The other way round. By the time they came into government in 2010, we'd had 3 successive quarters of growth. They escaped a double-dip recession by the skin of their teeth. But the economy flatlined until George Osborne actually, very quietly, went to a plan B, went back to Alistair Darling's budget and tried to stimulate the economy.
Is it not, would be a very Labour sort of policy to try to pay off the debt, to reduce the deficit and even start paying off the debt, because the debt in a redistributive tax system where the government's income, its revenue comes from taxation, that debt is then paying back that tax,
Yes.
that money, to city financiers, the gnomes of Zurich, who are foreign investors who hold British gilts, who hold British Treasury bonds. The debt is itself a mechanism of taking taxation and then giving it to the rich.
Well, the problem with the debt is, of course, you're paying interest on it as well. So a large part of what you've got coming in is paid out in interest.
That's what's buying the yachts in Monte Carlo, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But, so in terms of how you're going to address that, if you get growth in the economy, the statistic is something like for every 1% of trend growth, you're getting something like £15 billion into the economy. So it's a huge advantage. You get people back to work, paying taxes, etc. And that was the lacuna, if you like, in that first tranche, the coalition. I mean, maybe they can blame the Lib Dems for that, but they ended up with a huge deficit still of £90 billion. And now they're talking about perhaps paying it off by 2025. What Alistair Darling said he would do, I go back to Alistair Darling because that's crucial, because that was after the collapse of Lehman Brothers and the financial problems that went around the world. And he delivered a budget in 2010. So you don't have to look at a policy or a white paper or a manifesto. You look at what he actually said they would do.
You're getting quite historical here, Alan.
But it's
we're
important.
a few days after a budget. We're looking at the future.
But it is important because part of that was capital investment in our infrastructure, to get people working when interest rates were the lowest that they were ever likely to be. And what George Osborne did was remove something like £25 billion from that capital programme, and we've been suffering from that ever since.
Talking of capital programmes, the Northern Powerhouse, there was an announcement of money for the Northern Powerhouse in the budget last week, but it wasn't much. And what I've heard, it was very vague, but what one can sort of extrapolate from notes one's getting from the government is that it's going to be spent in the west, the northwest on the whole, and a bit in Lincolnshire as well, but not very much around the Humber. Why is this region forgotten? And the Northern Powerhouse minister is a local Humber MP. Why are we not getting
It's
that
a very
money?
good question, and a point we've made to Andrew Percy. It's this focus on the West, on Manchester in particular and Liverpool.
Blackpool, I hear, is getting a lot of the money.
Blackpool, we're going to bid for roadworks in Hull, but we've constantly made this point that the Northern Powerhouse will only work if you link up the West Coast with the East Coast, if you improve that transportation right across. If you do things like a cruise terminal in Hull, there is no cruise terminal down the East Coast. A cruise terminal in Hull will bring tourists into Yorkshire.
People really want to go on holiday in the North Sea?
Yes, not in the North Sea. No, they want to go on holiday in York. They want to see the glories of the Yorkshire Wolds. They want to see the glories of North Yorkshire. They want to get to Leeds, which is a vibrant city. You can't do that on a cruise terminal, on a cruise ship, unless we have a cruise terminal on the East Coast. All of that is crucial to our economy. We've just had a problem, incidentally, electrifying the line from Selby to Hull, which completes electrification across Wood. The rest of it hasn't been electrified yet, right across the Pennines. And we've been told by the Secretary of State for Transport that's now been dropped. We're not going to get any help with that.
But it's not necessary because the technology of the new trains that's going to be running along those lines
rubbish.
doesn't require the electrification.
No, that's what they say. That's their reasoning. That was the case when they originally signed up to do this deal with us, which is to bring it forward. Incidentally, with private money going in from Hull trains. Nowhere else in the country is private money going into electrifying a route. But these are bimodal trains, but they don't want them to be the train operators would rather turn off the diesel and run on electric. They can't do that if it's
Assuming that your party is going to remain in opposition for the next few years anyway, which is not an assumption that we'll proceed with later on, but how can you put pressure on the government? What's going on in the House of Commons with a government majority of only working 16? How can you get more money? How can you bring it here?
Well, there's two things about that. First of all, it's the very crucial point in the debates within the Labour Party is that we have to be a party of government, not a party of protest. And this is what you get when you lose general elections. The second point is Theresa May's government is very vulnerable. It has a very small majority. Some people put it at 17, some put it in 12. There's an issue about Sinn Féin MPs who never take up their seats, etc. But it's a small majority. And that gives us a lot of opportunities to defeat the government. So I think that's what the government saw coming on national insurance, which we've just been talking about, that the number of Tory MPs you mentioned combined, of course, with the opposition MPs, means that they would lose that vote. So they put it back to August. Unprecedented, by the way. It's part of a finance bill that will be left over until we come back after the summer recess.
And that's just the House of Commons, where nothing compared to the revolutionaries in the House of Lords at the moment. Alan, we'll have to stop there for a moment.
Yes, sure.
Join me again in a couple of minutes. Welcome back. I'm still with Alan Johnson, Member of Parliament, Labour Member of Parliament for Hull, West and Hessel. I won't go into the rest of your CV again, Alan. I want to talk about Europe. You led the Labour in for Britain campaign, Labour Party's Remain in the European campaign during the European referendum. And it didn't work, as we know. Before I ask why that happened, why did you want to stay in? We've only got 10 minutes, so not very long.
Can't give you
and
all that.
why would it be good for Hull specifically?
Let me correct you. It did work. For 66% of Labour supporters backed Remain. And Professor John Curtis, who's the world-renowned expert on this, of Glasgow University, has just done the figures for constituencies like Grimsby, Stoke, Hull. The majority of Labour supporters in those constituencies voted to Remain, 53%. So our campaign was getting Labour voters. Now, if David Cameron had got his own supporters, he decided on this referendum, he went and did the negotiations. He was leading this, only 44%.
And if I wanted to know about the woes of the Conservative Party, I'd have called a Conservative
Yeah, but it's very
politician
important to put it right about the Labour campaign. Labour campaign succeeded in getting Labour supporters to go and vote Remain. Why did we want to Remain? Because, well, where do we start? We have access to the biggest commercial market in the world on our doorstep. No tariffs, no non-tariff barriers. It's a market that we very much led the way in creating. Why would we turn our back on the nearest and biggest commercial market in the world? People say, well, we can export to the Commonwealth. We export more to little Ireland than we do to the whole of the Commonwealth put together. People say, well, we can export to America. Even if we didn't have a protectionist president now, even if we didn't, we export 65 billion pounds worth of goods to America. We export 240 billion pounds worth to the European Union. So the European Union is our biggest, closest and most important market. We not only want to stay part of it, we want to be influencing what happens in that market. And in an increasingly dependent world, we should be involved internationally, not turning our back, walking off into some splendid isolation on the back of some weird optimism that we can suddenly recreate the empire of old. It ain't going to happen.
Alan, you're a splendid advocate for it, but you're 8 or 9 months too late, I'm afraid. Those who voted
Yeah, but you were asking about the Labour campaign and why I support it.
Well, just let me get back to that point. Why the Labour campaign for staying in. You said that it was successful in persuading Labour Party voters to vote to stay in.
Well, the majority. But not enough.
Why did it not succeed in persuading people from outside the Labour Party as well? Because that's,
well,
half of British politics.
I'll give you one reason, and I saw it happen, and this again goes back to David Cameron. We talked about this ridiculous commitment in 2015 not to raise taxes. In 2009, in opposition, he said he would reduce net migration to the tens of thousands.
That was it. Migration was the issue that made people vote.
Because on May the 24th, just a month before the referendum, the Office for National Statistics published the latest net migration figures. Record 333,000, higher than when I was Home Secretary, 160,000, higher than after the accession countries came in 2004. There's never been such a huge figure on net migration. Now, majority of them were from outside the European Union, not from inside the European Union. But imagine that with the Leave side, understandably, making immigration their big issue, and the Remain side looking to make the economy the biggest issue. On that day, May the 24th, you could feel the argument slipping away from us. Not only was this record net migration, but here was the man who said he would get it down to the tens of thousands, 7 years later, at record levels.
May I suggest that another reason, maybe, that you didn't get outside the Labour Party is that the leadership of the Labour Party itself gave you half-hearted support at best in the Remain campaign. The leader, Jeremy Corbyn, you described in the Times last year on the 17th of September, he is totally incompetent and incapable of being a leader of a political party, and he knows it. Well, tell us what you mean, Alan.
That was during the election campaign, of course, and I was supporting his opponent.
If he does know it, if he does know he's incapable, why is he doing it?
You can blame Jeremy Corbyn for lots of things, but not for that result. I thought Jeremy Corbyn could have done more, incidentally.
No, I'm not talking
but
about
he came out in support.
Not the referendum result specifically, but if he's incapable and incompetent to be leading the Labour Party and he knows it, you know him, you sit in the House of Commons with him, why is he doing it? What makes Sammy run?
But your point was that he was one of the reasons why we lost
that was a little link
David
from two subjects.
David Cameron's responsible for that. It's his responsibility for the mess we're now in that respect.
David Cameron's history, getting back to Jeremy Corbyn.
For Jeremy Corbyn, in the referendum, in the election campaign, I said those things. I wasn't successful. He won.
This is the leadership election campaign.
The leadership election. And when you're running, and when you're in a leadership campaign, you say things about the people who win and the people who lose. But after it's over, you unite behind the leader. That's what I'm trying to do.
Well, how easy is it to unite behind a leader who clearly, and I don't try to make windows into men's souls, but clearly most of the Parliamentary Labour Party is not behind Jeremy Corbyn, while most of this new mass membership of the party in the country outside Parliament is behind him, as he's demonstrated with 2 leadership wins. Now, if there is a disconnection between the leader and the parliamentary party, the main job of a leader of a party is to lead the party in Parliament, how on earth can Labour mount an opposition to the government?
That's a fair assessment of the situation. And during the election campaign, we made the point that actually you cannot do the job properly if you don't have the support of your Parliamentary Labour Party. It's like a football team, the manager losing the support in the dressing room. And to a certain extent, the fans are saying, well, you've got to carry on even though we're heading for relegation. All those arguments were aired. Jeremy Corbyn won. I don't want to make Labour can't win another election a self-fulfilling prophecy. So me and my colleagues, the PLP members that you mentioned, are trying very hard to be supportive, to show a united face, and to try to ensure we win in 2020.
But with gritted teeth sometimes, I suspect.
Well, I think that's the same for some people, whoever the leader is. No leader ever has 100% support.
Well, let me put a hypothesis to you, that there's a lot of the membership of the Parliamentary Labour Party which has more philosophically, ideologically in common with some of the more left-wing Conservatives even, certainly with the remaining Liberals, and a lot of the European Remainers must find some sympathy with the Liberals, which is now the only party wanting to have a second referendum, wanting to try to at least tie in closely to Europe. If there is a general election soon, as William Hague has suggested, there are likely to be many more Liberals, many more Labour parties of the traditional Labour Party as opposed to the Corbynite Labour Party probably coming from Scotland. Is there not a possibility of a new party, that there's an official Labour Party with Jeremy Corbyn and then a more centrist, more progressive, more old, new Labour, as it were, party involving the Liberals and maybe even some Tories and maybe even some Scots?
I think...
and would you lead it?
I think it's unlikely, no, but I think it's unlikely that there will be a general election. I think Theresa May has been so emphatic about not having one. And I think she wants to keep something up her sleeve for further down the talks on Brexit. She may well need to hold a general election then.
But one of
not now.
Her temptation for that general election is quite a powerful argument, though. She's only got this small majority in the House of Commons.
Sure.
She needs to have a mandate so that she can dominate the House of Lords. And she has the Jeremy Corbyn card. Jeremy Corbyn, effectively, we must objectively acknowledge, can't win a general election.
Oh, I wouldn't say that. I mean, I'd say, if you were sitting here a year ago, you'd be saying probably that Trump would never be elected as president of the United States, and probably it's inconceivable that Britain would vote to leave the European Union. So there's been all kind, and in Italy, the Prime Minister would probably win a referendum. Referendums have gone against everyone this year. They went against the Colombian president who negotiated a peace deal for...
We rarely get the Colombian president in the studio.
But referendums have not gone well for the people who have called them, and the favourites have really won. But your question was about, will there be a new political party? I don't think there will be. First of all, it's about British politics. It's quite easy. Macron has started his own party very quickly.
In France.
Sarkozy did the same thing in France not long before that. And in other countries, particularly countries where they have proportional representation, you see these new parties develop all the time. Italy.
Well, why, very quickly, why is it that everyone's angry then? I mean, people voted for Trump, people voted for Brexit, people voted and UKIP, people are likely to be voting for Marie Le Pen. Dutch politics is suddenly going very off-centre and very right-wing. The Prime Minister of Hungary is a great populist demagogue. Why is it that this old politics is being rejected democratically in 30 seconds?
In 30 seconds, I don't think Le Pen is going to be elected. I think Macron's going to be elected. She may win the first round, she won't win the second.
Even if they don't win, they're going to get very big minorities.
There is no way that Geert Wilders is going to be the Prime Minister of the Netherlands.
But Trump did win.
Alternative
We did
for
have
Germany
Brexit.
is not going to win. Trump won in America, yeah. And America is America. And incidentally, Obama left office with the highest rating for any outgoing president ever. Where do you put that? So
well,
I don't think,
Alan,
I think it's quite handy on these things
I'll have
to
to
say.
stop you there on that happy Obama note. We'll try to get him onto Hot Topic next week. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Join me, I can't make a promise about that, but join me again next week for Hot Topic.